Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming today. Really appreciate your interest and enthusiasm for this topic, which I know everyone has something to offer when it comes to storytelling, narrative, and that sort of thing. With me presenting today, or with us presenting, I'm not presenting, is Mary Henson, Senior Instructional Designer Extraordinaire, holder of a eggless cookie recipe, oatmeal cookie recipe that I demand to know more about through tasting it. And then also
Okay.
Mary Scraffa, who is a professor of child and family studies, and they're going to talk to us and hopefully share all together as a group our ideas about storytelling in online learning. So take it away.
All right. So I will share my screen. Thank you, Chris. And we will start with our slides. And here we go. I'm so glad to have a chance to talk with you and for us to learn together. And I think the most exciting thing that could happen is we all think more about how we want to use story for learning. And we'll all have different
In
ways that
just a
we
second, baby. In just a second.
so as Chris said, I'm really delighted that Dr. Scraffa is joining us today because we've collaborated on these elements in many of our classes. And so I'm delighted to get a chance to hear from her. As we go along, if you have questions or thoughts and you want to either raise your hand, interrupt me, or put it in the chat, all those would be great. I learned this week that Chris did his dissertation in part on storytelling, so he is way qualified to handle any question that any of us have on this. And I think that's what I'm most excited about, though, is for us to start this conversation and have it together. Because as we think about storytelling, it's so fundamental to the first ways any of us began learning. You know, we began learning by doing, but we also began learning by people telling us stories and guiding us in that way. So my objectives for today is that we can recognize storytelling for memory. We'll be looking at some research in that we can identify ways to use stories in classes, and that we can discuss tools for storytelling online. And so we're going to begin with storytelling and memory. And so let's start with your memories. Chris, do you think we'll be able to enable some breakout groups for this?
Just say when.
Okay. So what we'd like to do is to give everybody a chance to reflect together. And I think it'll be most productive in a smaller group of about 5 or so. And the question is, can you remember stories from your educational experience, how those influenced you? And so we want to just think about those and share with those. And this is a way for us to think about, how is story important in your learning? Okay.
Okay. So how many minutes would you like the breakout rooms? And I'll do since we have 16 on now, I'll do groups of 5, so three groups.
Let's do 5 minutes.
We'll do it.
That should give everybody a chance to share.
Yep. So I'll also include the co-host when assigning, and here we go. 5 minutes. And opening the room now. I haven't done this in a while. I'm glad it's working. I'm glad I can work it.
Great job, Chris. It worked for us.
Good.
Is everybody back in the big group now?
31 more seconds, and then they'll rejoin us.
Okay.
By power of technology.
All right. I sometimes group work can be a little painful, but it wasn't in our group. So I I appreciate the chance to hear from others about how stories have been impactful in their educational experience and in their teaching now.
5 more seconds.
Just having that relationship with people can make a big difference.
It does. I think, oh, we might have to.
We're back.
Are we back?
Yes.
Okay, we're back. We're talking, but we're back.
All right. Well, thank you. I thought that was a really refreshing way to kind of set our purpose as we think about why it's important and how it has been important to us in our educational experience. So, as we think about our brains on stories, there's this research from the University of Chicago I found really interesting. And what they did actually is they looked at MRIs, people who were watching or listening to Sherlock, the series, and they found that there were patterns in the MRIs that essentially shows that people were engaged in the same way at the same time. Imagine almost syncing the brains of people who are watching, and then at times of less attention, people kind of had multi-focus, but then again there were peaks at the same places where there was kind of a focused high climax or something. So as we think about that, it's interesting to think about how stories can get people's attention, but also how that stories can be impactful in keeping attention or refocusing attention, and how that amounts to activity in the brain. This is a book that I've found to be just so interesting. It's about the science of learning, and it's written by some Washington University researchers. And one of the things they say is this, that our understanding of the world is shaped by a hunger for narrative that rises out of our discomfort with ambiguity and arbitrary events. And so that even if it's not consciously realized, we're always building this narrative about why things happened and what things can happen. And that's always going on, and that's part of our human experience, essential to who we are, but also essential to how we learn. And I have another quote as we think about it from Jerome Bruner. That storytelling performs the dual cultural functions of making the strange familiar and ourselves private and distinctive. If pupils are encouraged to think about the different outcomes that could have resulted from a set of circumstances, they're demonstrating usability of knowledge about a subject. Rather than just retaining knowledge and facts, they go beyond them to use their imaginations to think about other outcomes, as they don't need the completion of a logical argument to understand a story. This helps them to think about facing the future, and it stimulates the teacher too. And I'd also like to look at it in this regard, that universal design for learning is about how the study of the brain has what we know about brain research and how that's affected how people learn and what we know about how they learn in different areas of the brain. And so, in UDL, they have charts where they can show how different areas of the brain are affected by why, by what, by how. And what is known is that when different areas of the brain are working, that really impacts long-term retention, what we really know to be learning. And, along with that, the brain and synapses, the pathways that are traveled frequently, those are the things that we remember, those are the things we rehearse, and those make strong connections in our brain, and all that amounts to long-term learning. And that's what we're all about. So, when I think about the why, the what, the how, all of these elements can be included in using elements of story. And as stories build pathways that we visit and revisit because it's either pleasurable or because it's memorable, and in that building strong connections and just solidifying the learning. So we're not talking about just being able to memorize something and regurgitate it, but actually being able to take it in as part of our deep understanding and knowledge for application.
Mary, you'll have to go ahead and share your screen again. It kicked you off of that.
Oh, okay. Great.
I got everything
So
you said. It's cool.
How many screens have we missed?
Couple slides, no big deal.
A couple slides. Okay, so let's see. Thank you, Chris.
I didn't know it was going to knock you off of that. That's something to remember.
That makes sense. And let me just share again. And now we'll go to this. And I want to show you these things. So we will start with here. And this is the quote from Make It Stick. And that's the way the book looks. And if you get a chance to read this book, I think you will find it very interesting and helpful. It's not just about storytelling, it's about all of the things you can do to all that's known in research. And some of it is kind of counterintuitive to practice, such as interleaving and things like that. And here's the quote from Jerome Bruner. And I will share these slides with everybody so that you can also look at them and check the links yourself, because within this I have links to blogs and research and articles. And then here is the UDL information in the different areas of the brain. And this is where it's probably the most important that we have the graphic to look at. Is anybody in this session a psychologist or neuroscientist? Just curious. Well, I mean, obviously I'm not either, but we've all benefited from the brain research. And that's the great thing about UDL, is it makes so much of that neuroscience accessible to us who haven't studied the brain in depth, about what those MRIs mean about learning, and going forward, what we know about how the brain is engaged when it's learning. So as we think about that, this is a quote from a blog that I found very interesting. Also, it really gets to our point that stories are essential to the way we live and how we understand the world, what happens in the brain, and it's why they're so important. So now I'd like to go forward and talk about storytelling in higher education and tools. And one way that we can do that is by sharing your personal experience. In our group, our breakout group, several people shared about how this has been done in their education and in their classes now, in a way to help people gain professional insight or inspiration, way to kind of scaffold what you know, what somebody else knows, to help get someone to a different level. And it can be a demonstration of growth. And, you know, a very easy tool to do that with is your cell phone. And so this one is turned to the side because, you know, we do have a chance, a way to do it like this. But if you're going to use your cell phone for online learning, I would recommend turning it horizontally. So along with that, that's why I have an X through this one. And so that you can see, if you're going to do this, you can just turn your cell phone horizontally. You might also want to use a mini tripod, and you can do a very short video, and it can be very impactful. And that's the thing to remember. That may be the connection the students need. We talk a lot about instructor presence in classes and what a difference that makes online. It's part of what storytelling can do: make a human connection, provide instructor presence. And you might find that's very helpful to do in terms of doing storytelling with your phone. You might also be able to do that as part of announcements or in the module welcome. So sometimes in online classes, we feel like because there was a development or a redevelopment, that much of the class doesn't really change. But there's always an option to provide a video like this in announcements or in a module welcome that will help people connect with you, and to also connect with stories in a way that will help them expand their learning. I can even show you, at the risk of having to reshare again, but I want to stop share for a minute and show you some ways that you can set this up. So, okay, I'm just gonna stop share and share again, and then I'll just show you this way. So you can see I'm going to turn this off, but I have a ring light, and that's another tool that you could get. And they're not very expensive. There are some that are $15, some $20 online. I wouldn't say I've mastered the use of this, but your teenage friends maybe have. It can help. Mary's smiling. Are your teenage children using ring lights, Mary? Just curious. No, okay, but some do, and they even have ones that are smaller than this. So this, I mean, this was like $20, and I bought it in the pandemic because I thought, well, we're really going to need this, but I don't actually use it very much. So, but I'm not really focused on my physical appearance, and I'm not presenting that much either. But if you're going to do a set number of videos for your class, you might want to make sure that your lighting is as conducive as possible. This one has a holder for my cell phone that can be turned up or down, like this or this, and that's very nice. So just as a thought, you can also buy a very inexpensive. Okay. Sorry, I just set off the alarm on my phone. But you can also buy a very inexpensive small tripod that holds only your phone and doesn't have a light. And that's also an option as you look forward. So I just wanted to kind of show you that and to think about that, because sometimes when we think about tools, we think, oh, I'm going to go online and I'm going to get a third-party tool, but it may be that you already have all the tools you need in your house, in your office, even right now.
Good
So
ideas in
go
the
back
chat, Mary. Kayla says you can check them out from the library. Brittany says you can go buy one at Ollie's for around $20. And
yeah.
Marcy said she received one free from I guess a book publisher for creating videos.
Cool. So it can impact the quality of what you're doing, and those are great tips. And in the grand scheme of things, $20 isn't very much for a tool when you already have a very high quality. Probably anybody who has a cell phone has a high quality video recording device already at your access. That has not always been true, but it's certainly true now. Almost all of our cell phones record video at a very high level of quality. Okay, so is everybody seeing my screen now? Okay. And so now we have some examples here from simulations in class, and we have Dr. Scarafa to talk about how you've used simulations and how those have become, and other stories, and how those have become important to learning in your classes. Dr. Scarafa.
Right. So hello, I'm excited to be here today and to share. I can't take all the credit. I must say that Mary Henson really pushed me towards doing this, and I always love her ideas, and I'm always willing to venture down these roads with her. So we have in Child and Family Studies, we've used several simulation stories within classes. And some of the benefits are just that it is nonlinear learning for the students. And so this allows the students to really think about what they're learning and how it's applied within the real world context. Because as I always tell the students, when we're working with children and when we're working with families, human nature and human behavior doesn't always happen the same way. Like you can engage in one activity with a child and engage the same activity with a different child, and both children are probably going to react to the activity in different ways. And so simulation stories really provide that opportunity for that nonlinear learning. It's also using simulation stories as a way for the student to collect information, to assess the information that they're getting, and then to make decisions about it. And so when we talk about critical thinking skills, higher order thinking skills, the simulation stories really provide a way to give those experiences to students, and that they're able to do them at their own pace, and they're able to go back and rework through them. Some of the other benefits are that it does give a more meaningful experience than just reading a case study. I know we do talk to students about case studies. We share case studies with them, but honestly, students, they kind of skip through the case studies. and pick out some of the salient stuff, but they're not necessarily reading it very deeply. And so these simulation stories help bring those case studies alive. And let's see, another benefit that we have is that we're able, and I think, Mary, can we show this simulation of the second grade teacher? This is one that Mary and I had come up with, because in our field, in child and family studies, we talk a lot about working with diverse families. And one of the diverse families that we talk about is working with families who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And so Mary and I came up with this simulation story to provide this ethical dilemma to students, but as a way for students to work through it at their own pace and process it in their own way. And so it's not necessarily that we're working through it in a large group and everybody's talking about it. And, you know, if you have different values or morals, you know, you might not want to say that to a large group. So do you want to kind of demonstrate it, Mary? I don't know.
Okay. So let's say you take the first pathway where you want to just avoid the issue, and then the issue continues to come up in a different way. So through
this
the
was-
scenario, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this was, the dilemma was, you have a child in your class who has two moms. And so the student had to work through what they would do. So Mary and I gave them a series of dilemmas that they had to work through. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary.
So you might end up interacting with the mothers or the principal or other people in the class as you go through the scenario based on the choices you make. And so within that, there are usually two choices, and each of those choices could lead you to a different scenario. So, you know, you change the seating, and then some things end up with positive outcomes, and some things end up with the student has been very troubled, and what are you going to do now? So presenting those kinds of different outcomes was important in how we went about it. So, you know, and then we had the moms come in, and then when you get to the end of it, then you have an option to restart and try it all again. And so there were just hundreds of ways to go through it.
Right. And the best way I can explain it to people is, if I was a child of the 80s and we had the choose your own adventure books, where you could read and then you could choose what you wanted to happen next in the book, and then you would turn to that page. But if you wanted to read the book again and choose a different path, you could. And so that's what I like about these simulation stories, is that students have that autonomy to choose which path they want to go through. And then depending on that path, they have different experiences. And so Mary put the ability for them to restart it, and if they wanted to work through it again, then they could and get a different outcome. I will say this, that we had a forced choice at the end, and so it didn't matter which path you went through. The choice at the end was the principal was always asking you to put together a presentation for a faculty meeting. And so then that was the project that the students had to do for the class, was put together a presentation on identifying strategies to support LGBTQ families.
And I think the important thing about getting to do this was that Mary and I were able to collaborate on it, because she, you know, knew the content so well, and the different ways that the topic could be received. And we're just thinking about, you know, building perspective for the students in the class, and how part of that perspective is recognizing that there were already a lot of different perspectives out there, and you will come into contact with them in the classroom in some way. So how do we build that into the stories of the simulation? But I always love working with Mary, because she's so organized and creative, and also gives me the information way, way ahead of time. So that gives us time to really think about what could happen, which we're happily working on a spring course now as well. And in that, let's see if I can show you this. But before we go there, I just want to quickly say that a lot of these simulation tools that was created in iSpring, which is something that you can buy, but you can also do that same thing with Google Slides, with PowerPoint. Articulate is another software package we use. But I just wanted to kind of show you how anybody really can do this. We have access to the Google Suite with our EKU accounts. And so all you need to do with any item in a slide is to highlight it and then to select the link option. And then from there, this is something that is kind of a secret, but the link option doesn't just enable you to put in or paste a link, but you have an option to pull in from a slide in your presentation so that you can actually make it. If I clicked here, I would jump to the very first slide in our presentation. Or if I jumped here, I would go to case studies. In fact, I think I set that up and then we're back there. So yes. So that function in Google Slides and PowerPoint is available to everything. And so the major thing about simulation tools and branching is just really the planning. What is the story and how will you put it together? The next, Mary was talking about the limits of case studies. So Mary, would you like to talk about how you've updated and made this idea more dynamic for your Spring B class?
Yes, so I teach a family involvement class, and I know Rebecca Crawford is on here, and she has taken it. She's taken over the face-to-face class for me. And so Rebecca, if you want to jump in, we do in that class, there is a home visit component. And so the students are required to find a family and to go to the family's house and do an assessment on the children in the family, work out, how many what resources they have available. And then the students are to create a plan for the family and for the children. And then the students are supposed to continue doing home visits throughout the semester and implement their plan. What we have discovered, one, because COVID, it was hard to do that during COVID and everybody was Zoomed out. And so doing home visits with the 3 and 4-year-olds through Zoom is very hard. And then the other thing was for our eCampus class, we ran into several issues with the students needed background checks and dealing with background checks from all different 50 different states, but then also territories. And we have students who are overseas, so dealing with background checks and this kind of thing. And so it just became very cumbersome and very hard also for the eCampus instructor to really monitor the students engaging in home visits. And so Mary Henson and I and the person who also instructs that class, we came up with the idea of doing case studies and doing home visits through these case studies. And so the beauty about working with Mary Henson is I give her stuff and I give her ideas, and sometimes it's a hot mess what I give her. She is able to, I love the way her brain works. She's able to come up with a lot of different solutions in how to work through it. So I gave Mary the parameters of our case studies, and then so essentially the students will be doing home visits and they get to choose which family they want to work with, and they'll still be carrying out the same objectives of the project. It's just that they will be able to then meet the family virtually. So right there, what Mary's showing you is these were the parameters. So they can choose whichever case study they want and whatever home visitor role that they want. And then we've outlined, who the family is. So this one is a divorced mom. We have with 2 children. This one is a military family. who have several children, and one of them is a foster child, and that's your role is the social service agency whose your case is that foster child. And then the first one is a grandmother raising a grandmother who has a teen daughter who wants to be an influencer, who probably has one of those ring lights.
She does. She absolutely does.
Who has a 6-month-old son. And so you're the family service advocate at Early Head Start, who's working with that family. So so it allows the students to choose which family they want to work with. And then Mary has started working on the cases so that then the students can choose which family they want to work with. And so we just felt like this was a really nice way to, again, it's not dry, just reading through a case study. It allows us the student to be more interactive. Mary and I talked through a lot of different ways of doing this because we will have students asking the family particular questions. And then, again, they can go through that simulation. But I did give Mary all the answers that the students will need in order to complete their project. But the project still has flexibility where the students will still have to come up with their own plan for the family and then work through that.
Yes. And then here's the start on the military family. So we're just looking at the welcomes they would all get with a variety of interest in having you in your home or not. Whereas the grandma is glad to have you there because she wants improved situation, maybe for her child. It is complicated. And then the military family, they have to have the intervention because of the foster child as part of the social services, but maybe they're not really receptive to having people come into their home. And then finally, the single mother who's worn out and raising 2 little children and overworked and overtired and those things. So those different scenarios might, Mary, have people give people in your class a chance to meet people they wouldn't normally encounter in their everyday life that may well be part of their practice when they start professional life.
Yes. And I know Mary and I had talked a lot about these situations, and we brought in the instructor, a person who typically teaches this class as well, and had conversations with her about what she would like to see and what experiences we feel the students needed to have. But yet the larger project, the students still have flexibility in planning and what they'd like to propose for the family. So it's not, again, not that linear learning, right, where you give them something and then they regurgitate what you want back. They still have that flexibility.
And I just wonder if anybody has a question or comment, because I'm always really drawn to what Mary wants to do in her class. And I wonder if anybody has a comment or question for Mary.
I see in the chat that Laurel said she's been the family side of that. So we're glad that the students are choosing you. And like I said, Rebecca, Dr. Crawford is now teaching that face-to-face. And I think that she might continue to have the students meet with real families, but for the online class, for the eCampus class, sometimes it was hard to help students find families. And then, like I said, the background check, managing that.
Great. Well, another tool that I wanted to think about a little bit.
Mary, there was a question.
Yes.
Anne asked, how time intensive is this? And do you use for large projects or general information delivery? I can't speak to the time intensive for putting it together. I know Mary Henson is doing that. But as far for this home visit project, we have divided it across the 8 modules. So the students have smaller assignments across the 8 modules, and they will engage with what Mary would show you in the first 2 modules and then use that information throughout the course. We just felt like it was important to break that down for them as they're learning more information throughout the course and then applying that information within the project.
Yeah.
How would you?
And we just want, and part of what that interactive does is add some visuals, just so you can imagine maybe being in the home yourself or meeting that person face to face. But Mary wrote out questions and a profile of each individual. And so from your practice, and it may be that you've even internalized, some different types of people that would interact with, that would be very natural for you to plug in those things, and then questions that you would ask on a home visit and possible responses. So I know that in any field, the privacy of the client and all is very important, but by doing a case study, we kind of are able to generalize some things that are said often, or things that might challenge someone in that observer role, and bring that to a question in class. And I'm sorry, Mary, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I while you and I were setting it up, we felt like this was a great way to kind of, there are those situations with confidentiality and things like that. And so this was a nice way to kind of take that out and let the students just practice and with the skills and get that information without having to do the external of finding a family and doing your background check and getting cleared and all that. So it was a way to, I think, when we're thinking about time in an 8-week class, any time that we can kind of cut down those procedures and those other things that are time intensive for students is helpful.
So storyboards is a tool that can be low tech or high tech, and so I am humbly showing you some things I did with my son to try to help him learn history a few years ago as they were working on things. Just, it's as simple as having somebody fold a paper into a certain number of parts and saying, summarize the story and give me those elements, and what we did find is it did help him learn. And this could easily be an assignment at a low level or a high level. So, and in doing that, the goal is purpose, memory, identifying, particular elements. Now, if you would like a more professional type of look, Canva does offer a storyboard that's free. It's a storyboard creator. And this is something that could be an assignment in your class, or could be something you create for your class to see, that would outline, for example, the steps in a home visit, or the steps in a chemical process could easily be done here. So this storyboard tool, I think, also has possibilities as well. But I put both the low tech and the high tech to just help us remember that. And I think that, Mary's narrative on each of those families is also something that you could easily use if you're pressed for time and you say, I don't really want to do the visual elements, but I do want people to think about story more. And I can tell you what a profile of a single family looks like, and I can generalize using my professional experience. And in that, you're providing expertise that a novice in your field does not have. And that's one of the things that I really feel very passionate about, that and so many times in online classes, I just want instructors to be able to provide information beyond the textbook. Why, that instructor presence, that instructor mentoring. is so important, and all of your experience. We want to bring that into the class, and I just think stories are a perfect way to do that. And so that takes us to here in our next breakout group, and this is a big picture question. And it may be that you reject this question and choose another question related to the topics today, but how might you view your course as a journey, a quest, and how would that change the way you view obstacles to learning and even the conclusion of the course? So let's see if we could do about 5 minutes, Chris.
Yep, we'll do about 5 minutes. I'll do 4, and then the last minute to recall everybody. How's that sound? Okay, happening now. We'll do 4 rooms since we have 20 people, 19 people here. Is that okay, or do you want 3?
Yeah, that's good.
Here we go. Please go ahead and join your breakout room. We're coming back now.
Okay, so everybody is back now.
Yes, and don't forget to share.
Thank you. Well, I really enjoyed the chance to talk with the group about that, and things that I learned from this is that some of us, in essence, we see storytelling is fundamental to all of our classes anyway. And sometimes, you know, scenario-based learning is so fundamental to a lot of our practice teaching and our practice learning. And so actually my final slide is actually all the references. And so what I'd like to do is provide in the chat a link to the slides if you're interested, and it will have links to the blogs and the research, and you might find that interesting as you look through and think about how what is said about online learning and how that impacts, how that comes to play in storytelling. But does anybody have anything that you would like to add or questions to discuss?
I think one of the things that's inherent in your presentation, Mary, is that you are challenging the concept of what traditional teaching entails. And my understanding of traditional teaching has always been lecture-based and where you have passive participants as your students. And this is just, and in our movement toward online ed, it seems like we've been trying to say, oh, it's a lot like teaching in person, and really it's not. We're really having to retool, and learn some new strategies and new applications. It's really a challenge, and so I appreciate having these examples, and I just love the case studies. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much for today. It's just been great.
Thank you, Anne. I feel like it is so important that we don't lose the teacher in the online, and that stories are just absolutely essential to that your expertise and your knowledge of practice, we just want to make sure we don't lose that in any way.
Charles has a question or has his hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. Maybe I missed it earlier, but what's the process that you all use for kind of ironing out or formulating and ironing out your decision trees for these role play or scenario based activities? Is it just a lot of iterative trial and error, or like where do you start to kind of come up with ideas for the branches? Obviously, you got an idea for like the ideal branch, but then the other tangential branches, how do you come up with those, make those something that somebody would choose?
And that's a great question, and I do want to throw that up if anybody else would like to respond, but I'll tell you, I can show you a little bit. Mary, be okay if I showed him case study 2 and the first thing that you showed me? And obviously the idea is so important, and so you can see here that that in case study 2, Mary has outlined who the family is and then about the child. And then there are questions there. And we have approached each of these scenarios in a different way, to be honest. The first question we were talking about, she showed me the case study about the choice of books in the classroom. And then I went from there to create all of the different people that would interact in the branches. And the tool that we used, iSpring, allowed you to visualize that branching as a kind of like a function tree. So that's a way that you could do it in terms of planning. But that's such an excellent question, Charles, because that can so easily become unwieldy. And that tree, though, would show if this, then you can go here or there, or then you go back to there. So you could see if you have loops that never end and all of that. And you could see it in the bigger tree in iSpring. But what I'm thinking about doing right now, though, is this is really just a level of progression. And you go through the interview and you ask questions, and then they come away from this and ask observations. So this tree looks different in that it is more at this level, these three things are happening, and that's the level where you meet the family. And at this level, these three things are happening. And they have a chance to read all three and hopefully expand their understanding of these different kinds of families. But then also they could go back and revisit to decide which case study do I really want to do. So that's the way we've done that. Maybe Mary, would you like to add?
Well, I just wanted to talk about the one that we did for when you have the case where you have two moms in your class and you're trying to. So with that, what we did was we did the classic. There was a challenge. The students had a choice. And then based upon their choice, there was a consequence, right? So because I chose this, now this is going to happen. And then with each consequence, there was a new challenge that happened. And so I really had to think about that. And Mary helped me. Mary scaffolded my learning through that. And how, what particularly were those challenges? Based upon those challenges, what were those choices we were giving for the EKU student to choose? And then based upon that, what were those consequences that led to a new challenge? And then, it could go on forever. And I know, Charles, in our small breakout group, you talked about gaming, and this does come from the world of gaming, and thinking about, okay, for that one, we were like, we had to just eventually end it. And so that's why we had the forced choice with them doing the presentation, because you can go on forever with the challenge, choice, and consequence.
I'm not sure if people like for an instructional designer or me to show how we put one of these together sometime, but I'm certainly more than happy to organize an hour session or get with individual departments or refer you to your instructional designers for kind of how we put those together. And I'm sorry to interrupt that. I think of it kind of in a weird way, like either we kill the patient, we maim the patient, but can possibly recover, because I've worked in nursing for a long time, or we, there's different levels of success potentially, or different levels of failure. The problem is time. So the more intricate we get, the more time consuming these are going to be. And so, but that's kind of how I think about crashing the plane, like a hard landing, a soft landing, and maybe the chance to recover. How many of those elements do you want in your overall story? And then kind of go from there. I use sort of an outline to flush ours out.
Perfect. I've really enjoyed the discussion today, and I appreciate the chance to share and talk with you all. And I'm glad Chris has offered that, because that would be a fabulous session for us all to attend on how to do a branching scenario and the mechanics involved. And what I think we should all remember too is we're not limited by technology really in any way, so that we can look at many possibilities with whatever technology we have available.
I'll get it on the books and see if people will show up. I'd love to do it. And maybe an ID or another faculty member would love to join me. I'd love to have that collaboration, because I can say something all day and I even teach, but it means so much more coming from your colleagues and folks that are doing it, carrying that 4-4, trying to make online work. And, it just hits differently. I so appreciate you all Mary and Mary, the dual Marys, for bringing the message today. And it's really a great one. Thanks for your participation. Are there any other questions for Mary or Mary? While somebody's thinking whether or not they want to speak, let me plug our upcoming events. PD2 for folks who've never contemplated online learning but need to do it, 8-week intensive course. Let me know if you're interested. Also, Lessons from a Winning course, Tuesday, February 7th from 11 to 12. That's Sada Inseta from Psychology. She's going to show Psi 859. That's going to be a great presentation. We have international expert Robert Cosma talking about design practices. We all are designers, how we can use design to make a better world. And he's going to be a great dynamic speaker. It's going to be a 2-hour session. I'd love for you all to attend those. Let me know if you want more information. I don't want to post a bunch of links for you to try to track down. I'm glad to provide that. If there are no more questions, thank you all so very much today.
Thank you.
Thank you.